G'day everyone, welcome to another episode of Wine Back Wednesday. And I've got a little bit more space in the winery. We're slowly chipping away at the new winery and getting the racks filled, putting some barrels in the right spot, etc. So getting closer to a functional winery. But today we're going to go revisit the Shiraz trial that I did in 2023 when we handpicked a row out here in our Shiraz block just outside of here from the winery, and I did 3 treatments with a small fermentations, about 240 kilos each, and the idea of the trial was to see the influence on rachis at different levels. So 2 weeks ago, if you're casting your mind back, if you haven't seen it already, go back and have a look. I did the 0%, so we handpicked it all. All the fruit was destemmed, so berries coming off those, off the rachis, off the stem that holds it obviously onto the vine. And then afterwards, I would actually add back the stalks. So 2 weeks ago we had the 0%, so the control as such. Today we're going to taste the 25% stalks, so obviously 200 and odd kilos. So best part of 50 to 60 kilos worth of fruit. I actually added back that volume of stalks, and I did it on weight. So I try to be as accurate as possible. So obviously with the 50% one, which I'll do next time, I've sort of used the same philosophy of the weight. So in theory it's standardised. It's as close as 25% as I could get. So without further ado, let's give it a go. So obviously 2023 was a cooler year, but we had some lovely dry weather through the late part of the season. So as I said a couple of weeks ago, even though the rachis per se hadn't started to lignify, that's when it goes from a greeny colour to a brown, and actually it sort of starts hardening up as such, lignification, which you often get into we do get it to a certain extent here in Australia and in some of the cooler regions in particular, in some of the varieties, but in some of the other regions, cooler regions around the world, they get lignification more readily than we do. So, because obviously in Australia it's quite warm in most regions, so obviously the fruit does ripen a little bit quicker, and things like lignification are a little bit delayed. So that's why we don't see as much over here. But as I said, in some some regions, cooler regions in particular, and some varieties, you do see more of it than other parts of Australia. So without further ado, let's give it a go. But in saying that, there's no lignification as such, I still tasted the stalks. And over the years, when I've done it in a red ferment, I'm going to use stalks inclusion within the fermentation. I'll actually chew on the rachis. And you chew it, and if it's really green and hard, obviously the sap comes out, it's quite aggressive, and there's this hard, bitter character to it. You go, nah, the stalks aren't ripe enough, this is going to be damaging. Unfortunately, that kind of flavour, if you do impart it into the wine, what I've seen over my years of winemaking, is the primary fruit character offers over time dissipates, whereas those sort of green, aggressive, sappy, stalky characters unfortunately seem to be quite consistent over time. Whereas if you find it and you taste it and it's nice and sweet, there's sort of sweetness and it's not a sugar sweetness, it's just this, I suppose this sweetness per se, sweet impression, and this taukiness, the tannins and that sort of bitterness really subside and becomes a bit tauky and actually quite attractive. So when it tastes like that and you go, ooh, it's one of those things I say, if it's enjoyable and you can't stop sort of chewing it and that, therefore your brain goes, yeah, this looks going to look good. And obviously over time, a number of vintages, experience, you sort of see it and you sort of have an idea that what it's going to translate to in the final wine. So, but I haven't done I've never actually done it off our block here of Shiraz. So I thought, what a perfect opportunity to try it, do a small little batch of trials, and the results were great. So I'm not going to do it every year, but it's good to have that, I suppose, that trial in the back of my mind and have that information handy in future vintages. So without further ado, let's give it a go. And remember a couple of weeks ago, it was really quite The 0% was really red fruited, lifted, spicy, and on the palate it was really sort of again, juicy, crunchy, sort of crunchy acidity and vibrancy, and lovely fine sort of just general fruit tannins, and really a pleasure to drink, and quite even and consistent and pretty. So I can smell it already. There's this red fruit character floating around, but straight away, if you've tasted a wine that's had stalks in it, there is this, I suppose, underlying blanket of lift. There's this sort of, it's not herbal, it's just another dimension, and it just lifts just some spice, and it actually makes, for me, it makes the fruit a little bit more darker in the darker spectrum. It's a very holistic thing, so it's synergistic. 1 + 1 never equals 2 in the wine industry, or very, very, very rarely. It usually equals +5 or -5, and straight away there is a what we call a stalky element, but it also is intertwining in that red fruit and making it more of a, I suppose, more of a plum. There's a meatiness and a darker sort of a purpley fruit spectrum as well. So straight away, really interesting. And even though it was 2 weeks ago, you can just, the memory bank's there, and the stark contrast is there. You can see there is a, I suppose, underlying similarity, but there is this significant stark contrast at the same time. And again, okay, the red fruit spectrum from 2 weeks ago, which was flowing, really pretty, nice and spicy, and so it had this crunchy acidity. This wine is that crunchy acidity. It comes through later on. It's quite mouthwatering at the end of the palate. There's lovely sort of red fruits, but in the early palate, with those stalks in it, it's actually quite puckering, and the sort of tannin profile starts a lot earlier. Yeah, and there's sort of some Chinese 5 spice in there. Again, yes, there are red fruits, there are purple fruits, purpley blue fruits. It's tight acidity, but the tannin profile starts earlier. So it's not disjointed, it's reasonably balanced. I think the wine's a bit cold, well, which is fine, not too warm obviously, but it is quite cold. The cellar is quite cold in here, so maybe that's subsiding the fruit profile, as I said earlier. Often over time, the fruit dissipates, and the tannin, those sort of stalky, raucous sort of fine tannins and whatever sort of hang around. So being a cold wine, I mean, it's not young obviously, sometimes the fruit is suppressed, and the tannin's a bit more pronounced, but it does start earlier. So there we go, gone from pretty red fruits, nice, fresh acidity, crunchy acidity, coming to this one, more darker fruit spectrum, tannins start earlier, more robust, still that good crunchy acidity on it, but completely different wine. So there we go, 25% stalks in our Smidge wine trial, our home block Shiraz here from 2023. Thanks for listening, and I've got 50% stalks coming to you next time. Cheers.